Welcome to Dear Fans. Caitlin Clark, the indomitable force of women's basketball, stood at the pinnacle of her career, a living legend whose every move on the court was a testament to courage, brilliance, and unrelenting heart. Her name was etched in record books, her jersey a symbol of hope for millions of young dreamers. Yet on this day, in a live interview broadcast to a global audience, she transcended the game entirely. The studio lights bore down on her as she faced a sea of cameras, her piercing gaze steady, her voice resonant with a quiet power that could silence storms. "I've decided to be baptized," she announced, her words a thunderbolt that shattered the air. The interviewer, Marcus Vance, a venomous pundit with a reputation for shredding reputations for profit, blinked in disbelief, his thin lips curling into a sneer he couldn't quite hide. The audience, a mix of fans and skeptics, gasped, their murmurs rising like a tide. Why now? Why baptism? Why would Caitlin, the warrior who'd carried teams through impossible odds, the sharpshooter who'd silenced arenas with a single swish, turn to something so unexpected before Marcus could unleash his venom? Caitlin pressed forward, her voice unwavering. "This isn't just about faith, it's about truth. I've spent my life breaking barriers, lifting others, fighting for every inch. This is my next battle, not for points, but for purpose, for everyone who's ever dared to ask, what's beyond the horizon?" The room trembled with the weight of her words. Caitlin wasn't just an athlete, she was a beacon, a hero who'd faced down doubters, injuries, and exhaustion to become a symbol of resilience. "I've poured my soul into this game," she said, her eyes blazing with the fire of 1,000 victories. "I've carried my team when the odds were stacked against us, inspired kids to chase their dreams, and stood tall when the world tried to knock me down. But the more I win, the more I see there's a vastness out there, a mystery no stat line can measure. I'm not afraid to seek it, not for me alone, but for all of us." Her declaration was a clarion call, a challenge to the cynics and a lifeline to the lost. The audience sat spellbound, their hero revealing a depth they'd never imagined. Marcus Vance, a man whose career thrived on sowing discord, couldn't resist. His beady eyes glinted with malice as he leaned forward, his voice a hiss of disdain. "What's this, Caitlin? Tired of the spotlight? Need a sob story to keep the cash flowing?" His words were a dagger laced with the greed of a parasite who fed on others' pain. The crowd bristled, but Caitlin stood unbowed, her presence a fortress against his pettiness. "This isn't about money, Marcus," she fired back, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "It's about meaning. Something you've never had the guts to chase." The audience roared her defiance, a shield against a coward too small to grasp her greatness. Marcus shrank back, his smirk faltering, but the seeds of his spite were sown. Days later, the world held its breath, not for a game, but for Caitlin Clark's baptism. Her decision had ignited a firestorm, and her team kept the location secret until the final hour, thwarting the chaos whipped up by her enemies. When the cameras finally rolled, they revealed a breathtaking scene, a tranquil river winding through a lush valley, the water shimmering like liquid gold under a sky painted with hope. Caitlin stood at its edge, her athletic frame draped in a simple white robe, a stark contrast to the jerseys that had borne her name through countless battles. Her usual ferocity had softened into a quiet strength, the kind forged in the crucible of adversity. A hero at rest, yet poised for a new fight. Beside her stood Pastor Emily Rivera, a woman of unshakable integrity who devoted her life to serving the overlooked and the broken. Caitlin had chosen her not for fame, but for her heart, a direct rebuke to the shallow opportunists like Marcus who plague her path. Emily spoke briefly, her words a gentle prelude to the moment everyone awaited, but all eyes were locked on Caitlin. This was the woman who defied gravity with her shots, who'd rallied her team from the brink of defeat, who'd stared down pressure that would crush lesser souls. Now she stood humbled not by weakness, but by a force greater than any opponent she'd ever faced. As Emily guided her into the water, the air crackled with anticipation. Caitlin's focus was absolute, her every step a testament to the warrior within. The pastor's hands steadied her, and then in a moment that felt eternal, she was submerged. The world watched in reverent silence. The champion who'd conquered courts, who'd lifted a generation on her shoulders, now surrendered to something beyond the tangible. When she emerged, water cascading from her hair, she was radiant, her eyes alike with a peace that defied explanation. She turned to the gathered crowd, friends, family, and a handful of loyal fans who'd braved the secrecy, and then to the cameras, her gaze piercing the screens of millions. Something had shifted. The hero had been reborn. Stepping forward, Caitlyn spoke, her voice a symphony of strength and grace. This isn't the end of my fight, it's a new dawn. The crowd hung on her every syllable, their breaths held captive by her presence. I have battled through pain, through doubt, through nights when giving up would have been easier. I've carried the dreams of kids who see themselves in me, fought for every point. When the scoreboard said we're done, but there's a war bigger than the court, a war for hope, for truth. I'm here to wage it, not just for myself, but for every soul who's ever felt the weight of the world. She looked straight into the camera, her words a bridge to every heart watching. Faith isn't retreat, it's rebellion. It's not denying what I've learned, it's daring to reach beyond it. There's a power out there greater than any crowd I've hushed, any shot I've sunk, and I've been running toward it my whole life. Her message was a sword cutting through despair, a torch lighting the dark. We live in a world that tells us to grind, to win, to break ourselves for glory, she said, her voice rising like a battle cry. I've done that, I've bled for it, but I'm telling you now, stop, look up, fight for what lasts. I've won games, but this is my stand for meaning for all of us. Marcus Vance and his accomplice Leah Grayson, a shrill harpy whose fortune was built on lies and betrayal, watched from their gilded lair, their faces twisted with envy. Caitlyn's light threatened their empire of shadows, and they struck back with a ferocity born of desperation. On their nightly show, a cesspool of vitriol masquerading as journalism, Marcus bared his teeth. She's a fraud, he spat, his voice's snarl of contempt. This baptism, a cheap trick to dodge her fading relevance. Leah, her eyes cold as a viper's, cackled in agreement. She's cracking, too weak to handle the pressure. The real Caitlyn's dead, drowned in that river. Their words were a venomous brew steeped in jealousy and the thrill of destruction. They rallied their army of trolls, paid shills who flooded social media with slander, twisting Caitlyn's every virtue into a vice. Their campaign was relentless. Marcus dug into her past, concocting tales of scandal, fake photos of wild parties she'd never attended, forged quotes from teammates she'd never betrayed. Leah, ever the opportunist, peddled rumors of mental collapse, sneering she's lost at faiths, just her excuse to quit their network. A machine of greed and deceit churned out hit pieces, their headlines screaming betrayal. Caitlyn Clark abandons fans for religion. They reveled in their cruelty, their laughter echoing through their glass towers as they plotted to bury the hero who dared to rise above their grasp. But Caitlyn was forged in fire, her spirit towered over their pettiness, her resolve a mountain they couldn't scale. Her words had already taken root, spreading like wildfire across the globe. Social media erupted with defiance. Fans posted videos of her greatest plays alongside her speech, captioning them, "This is our champion." Young girls who'd idolized her shots now clung to her courage, writing, "She's fighting for us all." Communities rallied, schools hosted forums inspired by her call to seek truth. Gyms became sanctuaries where players spoke of purpose beyond points. Her former teammate Jess Harper tearfully told reporters, "Caitlyn's always been our rock. She's not just winning games now, she's saving souls." The villains doubled down, their desperation palpable. Marcus leaked a doctored audio clip claiming it was Caitlyn mocking her fans, a lie so blatant it crumbled under scrutiny. Leah staged a tearful expose alleging Caitlyn had bullied her in a fabricated encounter years ago, her crocodile tears fooling no one but the most gullible. Their empire trembled as their lies unraveled, ratings plummeted, sponsors fled, and their own staff turned whistleblower, exposing emails where Marcus bragged will bury her make millions while she burns. Their downfall was swift, their malice their own undoing. Weeks later, Caitlyn emerged from her silence in an intimate interview with Sarah Kim, a journalist whose quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to the vultures who hounded her by a roaring fire. Caitlyn reflected, her voice a melody of strength and vulnerability. "I faced hate before, crowds booing, coaches doubting, injuries that should have ended me," she said. "I rose every time. This was different, harder, but it's who I am. I've given my blood to this game, my heart to my fans. Now I'm giving my soul to myself, to them, to the fight for something bigger." Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to shed. "We're all warriors in our own way, searching for light. I found mine, I hope they do too." Her words were a hymn, a promise of victory. Cry Marcus and Leah's empire lay in ruins, their names synonymous with disgrace, while Caitlyn's star soared. Churches, mosques, and community centers reported surges in attendance, not for dogma, but for dialogue sparked by her stand. Scientists wrote essays on her curiosity, poets panned odds to her quest. She'd ignited a movement, a global awakening to the power of purpose in a final earth-shaking speech Caitlin stood before a roaring crowd, her silhouette framed by a sunset that seemed to bow to her. "I'll keep playing, keep fighting," she vowed, her voice a tempest of resolve. "But this is my war now, for every kid who's been told they're not enough, every soul crushed by doubt. We can win games, build dreams, but we must build each other. Science, sport, faith, their tools to lift us, not divide us. That's my legacy, to light the way." The crowd thundered. Her enemies vanquished, her heroism a flame that would never fade. Caitlin Clark wasn't just a hero, she was a titan, a force of nature who'd turned her triumphs into a crusade for humanity. Marcus and Leia, broken by their own bile, faded into obscurity, their graves dug by the very spite they wielded, and the world forever changed, watched in awe as Caitlin forged a new path, not just to the stars, but to the soul of what it means to be. Like this video and subscribe this channel. Thank you.